Cigarettes permeate the air as Marcus enters the apartment, his arms weighed down by the groceries, and he's taken aback. He kicks the door closed and places the bags on the kitchen counter before bringing his nose up into the air and taking in a breath, allowing the aroma to fester. Adaline must be on the fire escape, he thinks to himself. She doesn't smoke much anymore, but that smell, Camel regular, non-filtered, lingers forever in his memory, a permanent spot for her alone and the time they met. Thick clouds swirl and hover over the patrons of the bar, a specter of times to be lost. Pushed in the corner, cut off from the rest, is Marcus, surrounded by friends in celebration. One of them has gotten engaged. Glasses and peanut shells cover the table, and the ashtray resting in the middle, full, and in order to stamp their butts, they crush those already extinguished. None of these are Marcus's, however, a man whose vices come not from those, by choice, a result pertaining to his childhood. Hearty laughs erupt among the men, the space they occupy being their own. One of them breaks from the group, heading towards the bar and vanishing into the void of characters only present for a moment in their lives. The crowd is dense and full of energy, smiles abundant in the cramped aisles and on the rough stools as the weather rages outside. Marcus looks towards his newly engaged friend, whose cheeks are plump and flush from the alcohol, and wonders what his mind must be like to have been able to find the one for him, to settle and gain fulfillment. His life, Marcus believes, is to be lived in isolation with days and weeks flying by, the only interactions being with co-workers and the nice cashier down at the grocery store. Not even his friends keep him company that frequently. He glances longingly, as though he is not worthy of companionship. The door swings open with violent urges as someone enters, the harsh snow blowing inside, taking the warm air with it, and everyone stuck in their bubbles, now a collective, as they shout for them to close the door. It takes the force of a few people to shut it, before a quick celebration and normalcy returns. Emerging from the slough of smoke and bodily fluids, with shot glasses in between each of his fingers, the friend grins wide before placing a shot in front of everyone, including Marcus, who takes it in his hand slowly. A few of them wince as they smell the foul odor coming from the glasses. Tequila. Standing above everyone, the smile remaining on his face and growing with every second, his still frame giving way for quizzitive expressions shared among the others. After a silent moment passes, he raises his shot into the air and bellows, through slurred speech, "May your adventures in the future with your wife bring you much happiness." In staggered unison, the rest raise their glasses and toast, "To the special boy," as they drink and gag. Throat burning and face scrunched in agony, Marcus slams the glass on the table and tucks his head into his chest in an attempt to stifle his pain. The others look at him with worry, but soon turn to laughter as he hacks, bringing his face up, red as a tomato, and someone hands him a glass of water, which he downs in a gulp. He turns his head to look at everyone, who continues the conversation without him, as the bar twists and turns. Collecting himself, he fixates on a point, burning a hole in the back of a stranger's head. An eternity passes, and Marcus settles, back to his typical self, as the stranger moves, forcing his eyes to adjust to the sudden glare of the lights beyond, and a vision comes too. Sitting at the bar, illuminated by the dangling shaded lights, is an angel. The words Marcus would go on to use when reciting the story. Adaline sits with a Manhattan in front of her, and a cigarette in hand, which is something Marcus would not see her without during their first few dates. The light above glistened off her amber hair, and the strays protruding from her scalp can be counted from the other side of the bar. His eyes widen with fear and embarrassment as she catches a glimpse of him staring, but he remains focused on her and her emerald eyes that brighten the place. Relief and delectation washes over as a crooked smile crawls across her face, and her cheeks turn to strawberries as she scrunches her nose up, causing Marcus to laugh with endearment. Stumbling outside, with the storm calm, everyone crams into the back of a cab in a rush, though not enough room for everybody. Marcus peers in through the frosted window of the bar to find Adaline still there, and relents to the boys that he will stay behind, that they have twisted his arm. He hands the driver an additional 10 to ensure their safe arrival home, and enters the bar again. Marcus makes his way towards Adaline, slinking around the stragglers as they sway about the minefield. "Hello, my name is Marcus," he rehearses in his head. "I was wondering if this seat here was taken." Now beside her, their eyes lock and freezes, cracking his mouth to let his soul speak, yet nothing comes out. "Would you like to sit?" she asks, her voice soothing. The evening after is a blur, a collage of vignettes. Chatting at the bar, dancing to the music in between the tables, and a walk down the nearly empty streets of New York as the snow drifts across them, sticking to their hair and clothes. That was 1968, and 5 years vanish with little care. Placing the milk and the eggs and the meat in the fridge, Marcus tiptoes towards the window Adaline is propped open that goes out to the fire escape and exits the apartment, a gust of wind sending chills through his body. Startled, Adaline shoots a glance at Marcus and drops her cigarette, sending it falling 10 floors below. They greet each other with a kiss, and when they part, she stares at him, a half smile signaling something off, but he pays it no mind, and sits beside her as Adaline places her head on his shoulder, and their eyes meet the night sky, gray, with full clouds ready to burst. The snow deafens the world, and with it swaying in the wind, making its way to the ground, nothing else exists but them. Their breathing is slow and matched to each other, in unison with body and mind, euphoria in its truest form. Neck sore, she sits up and looks over at Marcus, his breath visible, and smiles as she takes in his beard with icicles hanging from it. Not being interested in men with beards at first, Adaline recalls seeing Marcus with one after a stretch alone, stuck in her mind to roam, a sign of bliss and adoration. The thick, lush grass caresses Adaline's body as she lays on the ground, the warmth of the sun gentle in its embrace, though her mind flutters with envy. Envy for those on this day, and many like it, who have the pleasure of sharing it with someone close. Above, the clouds glide along the bright blue sky with care, and as Adaline remains still, eyes fixated on the shapes, she begins to see a story. Her story. And with the retelling of her story, she cries. It has been 5 months since she last saw Marcus boarding the bus to travel across the country, a trip to his hometown on the eve of his father's death, only weeks after his brother was wounded in Vietnam. Marcus joked about the draft not being able to touch him, and it seems he was right. Letters are the way of communication between the two, though with weeks-long hiatus before receiving new ones, events pass and memories fade. Their affection towards each other never wavered, with pages upon pages documenting this, and the feeling felt at the exact moment pen hit paper. At times, tears ran down Adaline's cheeks as she wrote, the weight on her chest releasing as her mind floods. As such, with worried hearts, images flash before her of Marcus and others engaged in situations jeopardizing their relationship, but she shakes them off. He wouldn't do that, she thinks to herself. Not to me. She sits up and takes a deep breath, the air around her calm and cool as it swirls about in her lungs before taking out a cigarette and lighting it. Her eyes wander around the park, the trees that sway against the tender wind, ducks honking at each other as they wade through the pool, birds swooping and attacking a worm to take back to their nest, and parents making the most of their day pushing a stroller as their baby rests. She becomes distraught, trapped with doubt and fear, not in response to the faith of her relationship with Marcus, but if she's worthy of such happiness. It isn't the stature of her morality that is in question, however, and in fact it is her charitable personality which intrigues Marcus, as that's a side of people he is unfamiliar with. Eating away at her is her own self-image, a reflection she is not fond of, and her emotional states, the words she chooses to use, that fluctuate with the passing seconds. Whether she is fit or not for a partner, and a house, and family, cross her mind on a regular basis, though as time comes, pushing them aside is a task done with little effort. She finishes the cigarette, rising from the ground to throw the butt away, and leaves the park. The streets are alive, packed full with everyone from all walks of life. The heart of New York, and the only place Adaline wishes to live. She looks upon them with amusement, grief, lust, peaceful, anxious. The faces inspire her imagination as she creates backstories to the characters she passes. A man wearing brown and worn shoes, dark blue jeans, a wild and colorful button-down, black reflective sunglasses, sporting wavy shoulder-length hair, strolls down the opposite side of the street. An artsy type, she thinks to herself, though doesn't try too hard, on his way to meet friends for a rendezvous at the pier, with sobriety in the rearview mirror, with whichever their drug of choice may be. She rounds the corner leading to the apartment, the clouds dampening her view with shadows, and witnesses a well-dressed man exiting a taxi, carrying with him a bouquet of flowers. He slumps as he walks, having traveled a great distance. This gives her questions as to whether the flowers are a gesture of unprovoked admiration or a sign of apologies to come. The taxi drives off, and the man remains still, his shoulders moving as he breathes deep, collecting his thoughts, before spinning around to have Marcus and her face to face. Adaline freezes. Joy and adrenaline coursing through her body, making it impossible to move. Like in a movie, the clouds part, sending the sun's rays shooting around them, and the hairs on Marcus's new beard glisten. Marcus makes his way towards her, and they hug, the scratchy ends caressing her face, inviting. She struggles through her racing mind and whispers, "I love you." The first words spoken to each other directly in months. A gust of wind forces them to shield their faces as snow slaps them, their cheeks rosy, and they rush to the window and hurry inside the comfort of the apartment. Marcus enters the kitchen and continues throwing the groceries away in the cupboards, while Adaline paces in the living room before falling onto the couch and letting go a huff. The tree in the corner is bright, sending the blue light flowing over Adaline and filling the room with a glow cut off from the harsh yellow in the kitchen. "I miss that smell," Marcus remarks. "What made you want to smoke tonight? Not that it matters." Stiff, Adaline stares at the floor, the cracking hardwood scratched from years of misuse, and refuses to say anything. Marcus repeats himself, to no avail, and as he puts the final item in its place, he saunters towards the living room, eyes wide with annoyance, and repeats himself again, with intensity rising. Adaline remains motionless, her eyes dreary. With a scoff, Marcus leans against the wall, as a splinter protrudes, exposing the wood underneath the paint. "That's all you know, isn't it?" he scolds her, with his voice growing deeper and louder. "Silence is your way to communicate, or what? You need to say something." She glances up at him, her face twisted with sorrow and pain, before looking down at the splinter in the wall. He follows her gaze and lets out an exhaustive and contemplative sigh as realization settles, and takes in a deep breath to calm himself. The record spins on the turntable, taking with it the melody of a familiar Christmas song, filling the apartment with its tinny sound through cheap speakers. With boxes of decorations sprawled along the floor like mines on a battlefield, Adaline dances to the music, weaving around furniture and setting up the tree. Tucked away, pressed against the wall at the table, sits Marcus, frantic in his mood as he writes with haste. Papers scatter the table as he runs his fingers through disheveled hair in frustration. He lost his job a month earlier and began a new one 2 days ago, though being in over his head would be an understatement. His concentration is broken through the incessant music blaring, though as the songs fade, replaced with crackles, the peace does not last as the thumping of Adaline continues. He pleads for her to turn the music down and halt the dancing until he is finished. She does not hear him, instead glancing in his direction to give a smile. With a huff, he slides his chair from underneath the table and stomps into the kitchen, swings the cupboard open, and slams a glass on the counter before pouring whiskey into it and returning to the table, making sure to drag the chair, prolonging the scraping sound. Marcus continues to do his work, though as Adaline moves more and more to the beat. She turns the volume up on a particular song she enjoys, and her steps become heavier. Tapping his pencil on the table, he asks again, through gritted teeth, if she can stop what she's doing for the time being, but again, she cannot hear him. His eyes burn a hole into his papers as he's unsure what to do and can't focus on the task. So he takes hold of his glass and gulps the liquor. Voice rising, he shouts to her to turn the music off, startling Adaline, who spins around it and drops an ornament, sending it smashing into pieces on the floor. Aggravated, Marcus throws the glass at the wall near her, with it shattering, causing the wood to split from impact. Adaline looks on in horror and disbelief as Marcus's face turns, twisted with rage, to a solemn expression of guilt, and he slumps in his chair. His hands shake, and without another wasted moment, he breaks down in tears, his sobs filling the air, overtaking the music. Feet glued to the floor, and with a wide pit in her stomach, she looks on, unsure what to do, and uncertain if she should do anything at all. Her gaze turns to the wall, the residue from the whiskey running down the side, sure to stick if not wiped soon, and the damage done, a reminder of events from the past long before she entered the picture. This, too, brings her to cry. To see Marcus like this, ultimate despair, hurts her, and her chest tightens. There is no way he is like this, like his father. Though he comes through at times, and when it arises he pushes it down, but she knows he needs her to calm him from time to time. He is better, and the pair know that, and it's their commitment that drives it. She builds the courage to step forward, and as she does, Marcus shoots up from the chair and races into the kitchen and grabs the bottle of whiskey so tight his knuckles turn white. Adaline lets go an obscured shriek, unable to relinquish much with the knot in her throat, and Marcus stares at her with bloodshot eyes as he pours the contents down the sink. The liquid splashes along the sides of the sink and swirl down the drain, cathartic, as if his father is leaving, and he lets a smile crawl across his tear-stained face. As the last drops leave the bottle, he dumps it in the sink and drags his feet towards Adaline and hugs her, his arms wrapping her body entirely, leaving no room for tension. She follows and grips her hands around his shoulders, not letting go. He tucks his chin into her shoulder and kisses her neck before whispering, "I'm sorry." They hold each other, bodies intertwined, their muscles still as the joyful music circulates around them. Adaline shifts her eyes back to the floor, twiddling her thumbs with something on her mind, though no way to properly articulate those thoughts. Marcus shifts his weight to the opposite foot, lifting himself off from the wall, and thinks to himself about the cigarettes that Adaline smokes only when something hops around her head, unrelenting. Pain. Rolling his eyes and beating himself up, he makes his way towards her, taking his time so as not to upset her, and sits down on the couch before kissing the top of her head, sending her to tears as she cloaks herself around his waist. Through sobs, Adaline begins. An appointment. A doctor's appointment a few weeks prior, and the follow-up being today. Marcus brushes her hair, repeating himself in a soft, mellow voice to take her time, that they have nowhere to be except right here, right now. A few minutes drift without a word spoken. Their breathing, mixed with the wind passing through the cracked seal of the window, the only sounds present. Adaline apologizes and lifts herself off Marcus, and the pair stare into each other's eyes, filled with tears and safety. Confused, he asks her what she's sorry for. She tells him of the tests done, how she wanted to know why they couldn't get pregnant, what they could do to start their family, and of the results. Her sobbing continues, breaking her speech into fragments, and Marcus hushes her, cocooning her with his body. "You never have to be sorry about that," he assures her. "The only family you needed is us." Marcus gets up from the couch while Adaline wipes the tears from her face and makes his way towards the turntable, placing a record on, and walks back to Adaline, extending his hand in a bid to dance. The crackle from the record fades, replaced with a joyful jazz rendition of a familiar Christmas song, making her giggle, and takes his hand. Illuminated by the lights that dangle off the tree and the reflection of the glass ornaments, the pair dance in the middle of the apartment to the music that fills the space with its tinny sound. Alone in their thoughts and in their hearts, they rest. Nothing else needed, and the memory that will linger forever.